All right, is everyone ready to digest the final episode? Are you mentally and emotionally prepared? Have you pre-grieved the ending of one of the greatest shows in television history? I hope so. But before we dive in, let's get some altitude on things and find a shape for our show in the post-Succession world. Since August of last year, when we started House of the Dragon coverage, HBO and this podcast have been on an unprecedented run. We went from House of the Dragon straight into The White Lotus Season 2, straight into The Last of Us, straight into Succession Season 4. A run at HBO that frankly might never be matched by any network ever again in terms of weekly domination. And yes, you can include Barry if you want, but I'm talking hour-long prestige dramas here, and HBO has absolutely dominated Sunday nights since House of the Dragon premiered on August 21st, 2022. Barrett and I had discussed keeping the streak alive and covering HBO's The Idol next. But early reviews of that show have caused us to seek shelter elsewhere, so it appears that run is coming to a close. As such, we are pivoting. We are pivoting and breaking the HBO streak and choosing to cover Silo Season 1 on Apple TV+. We will be taking next week off because we need a break, and then the following week we'll be digesting and discussing Silo Episodes 1 and 2 on Apple TV+. If you already have Apple TV+, then you're all set to continue along with us. But if you don't, I'm sure there's a free trial you can sign up for to enjoy Silo Season 1 with us. Thank you for being here today. We appreciate you very, very much. Please tell your friends and family about our show, and we will be back in a couple weeks to begin coverage of Silo Season 1 on Apple TV+. For now, enjoy our discussion of the Succession series finale. Roll tape. Welcome back for another helping of oysters, clams, and cockles presented by Bolin Media. I am eldest boy Ross Bolin, joined today by eldest boy Barrett Dudley to digest and discuss Season 4, Episode 10, the final episode of Succession titled With Open Eyes. Barrett, are you ready? How did you sleep?
Oh, man. I slept okay. But I really wasn't feeling great until this morning. It's Memorial Day. We've got the day off, but here we are doing work that we love, so it's really not even work. And
that's right.
And that's when I really started feeling good. Is just a moment ago when I had a breakfast taco and a spiced carrot muffin and a little bit of cold brew here. And what some are calling a meal fit for a king, a meal fit for a king.
I'm happy for you. I'm running on an empty stomach, pumped full of 2 large cups of coffee.
That's how you do it. That's the real breakfast of champions and CEOs, right?
I'm having slight body tremors, shaking
just have like
a little.
A slight twitch going.
Yeah, a little bit
into the 2-hour podcast that we're about to do.
That's the way I like to do it, though. You know, that's the way I like to do it. Before we dive in, head to bolinmedia.com/shop and grab yourself some Succession-inspired merch to commemorate the end of one of the greatest shows of all time with t-shirts and hats worthy of it. We've got Disgusting Brothers World Tour 2023 t-shirts, which have never been hotter than they are today. And as such, I am wearing mine right now. We've got the Kendall, Logan, Roy crossed out or underlined hats and shirts as well. I'm wearing the hat right now. We've got Connor Roy 2024 presidential campaign shirts. The con heads are coming. Oyster Clamco hats and shirts as well. So support our show and celebrate Succession by going to bolinmedia.com/shop today and gearing up. Now, let's get into this thing, shall we?
Let's do it.
We start the series finale with a shot of Manhattan, which I thought was appropriate because we've spent several years there over the course of Succession. And there's a voiceover of a news anchor stating that in terms of M&A action, M&A meaning masochist and asochist, regulatory concerns have receded so Lucas Matsson could take control of the deceased Logan Roy's empire as soon as tomorrow to add to his streaming betting, sports, and socials everything app, which I think mimics kind of what Elon Musk has talked about with this X app.
I've never heard of that, but I thought it was notable that the app that Gojo has here, the Matsson app, is not something that really like exists for us. Like we don't have like Instagram doesn't also have like a sports betting feature, you know, which by the way, it probably should.
Yeah, no, it wouldn't hurt. And my apologies, I misspoke. M&A actually stands for mergers and acquisitions.
I always thought it was murders and executions. Shout out to Patrick Bateman.
So the strategy of going regulatory via their relationship with Mencken totally failed, right?
Big failure. Big hot failure.
Yeah, Roman fucked it.
He fucked it.
By crying at his father's funeral, and we hear from Shiv that Mencken might not even actually win the presidency a little bit later on in the episode.
That's right.
So the Gojo deal is essentially at the finish line now. That's where we start off this final episode.
And I would also just note here that there's a bunch of Roman is kind of missing, and it seems kind of known to everybody. I think a couple of days have passed here. I think it's safe to assume that this is not the very next day.
This is the first episode in at least a handful here where I'm willing to concede that it is entirely possible it's been a couple days.
Yeah,
because there's even a line later in the episode where Roman jokes to Connor and Willa that he thinks that's called the 2-week itch.
The 2-week itch, yeah.
Which, obviously it's the 7-year itch, which is a wonderful Marilyn Monroe movie, by the way.
Is it the 7-year itch? I thought it was the 10-year itch.
7-year itch.
7-year itch.
Yeah.
Okay.
Where 7 years into a relationship, stereotypically, you get the itch to look elsewhere.
Yeah, hit the eject button.
Yeah. You just become bored and complacent with things. So I think it's possible that a little more time has passed. Kendall Logan Roy struts into the Waystar Royco offices to meet with his team, telling people to carpe the diem.
Hey.
Carpe the diem. Seemingly confident that he'll be able to win the board and maintain control of the company, at least on his stroll inside, but Kendall's vibes are immediately crushed by Tellis, telling him that he doesn't think they have Stewie's vote, and he doesn't think they have the shareholders or the board members to stop Matsson's takeover from happening. And as Barrett pointed out, it turns out Kendall doesn't even know where his brother Roman Roy is, who we last saw taking a beating from the people in the streets. But he tells Telly Bear he's confident that he's got Roman, who obviously has a vote on the board, and that's why his presence is important, right? Then the opening title sequence rolls, and if you didn't get chills listening to the Succession theme music and watching those visuals one last time, you might be dead inside. It was a special moment, honestly.
Yeah. It sucks that the show is over. It really does.
It does.
And it's one of the greatest title tracks and just opening sequences in history television. And it's like as much I loved this episode, at the end I was kind of like, we could do more. We could do a little more.
Yeah, I mean, let's just take a moment up front and say that I thought it was interesting that they chose to close this thing out in a way that had people on Twitter and on social media buzzing like, oh, they set it up for a sequel.
Look, here's what I think they definitely did do. They left the door open a crack.
Sure.
They left the door open a tiny crack, and I think that they ended it where they wanted to end it, but they are giving themselves the modern day option of being like, in 5 years, hey, you know what? We'd really like to come back for a coda for a Succession season, and HBO for sure would let them do that. And I'm not. This is not wishing bad things for any of the people involved on Succession, but my guess is that most of these actors would also be able to come back.
Yeah, I thought about it, and it seems like it would be. First of all, I agree with you. I thought they left the door cracked just in case, right?
Yeah, just in case.
But it did occur to me that similarly to the way when Game of Thrones ended, and a lot of the actors and actresses involved had really elevated their careers through the course of that show, that it would be extremely challenging to actually get everyone back. Now, that being said, there are several different angles for, what happens with Roman's life from here on out, what happens with Kendall from here on out, which I have some thoughts on and we'll share at the end of the pod. But there were several, obviously, what's, Tom's reign like? There's a lot they could go play with if they wanted to. I don't think that will happen.
I don't
just
either.
Because I think Jesse Armstrong knows he executed this perfectly.
I agree.
That sound you hear in the background is a jumbo jet successfully landing. This is hard to do. Very, very hard to do.
Yeah.
As we've seen. You can have a great show and then totally fumble the ending. Endings are tough. To do it in a way that does justice to the entire story, in this case, what are we talking about? 10 episodes per season, 4 seasons, 40 hours of storytelling, and to close it out in a way that does it all justice and does the characters justice is an incredibly difficult feat that they have accomplished here. You're really, really putting things at risk to go back to that well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I don't think they will.
Nobody wants an Arrested Development situation.
Please, God, no.
But it's like the selfish little kernel inside of my pea brain. You know what I mean?
Yes, I'm with you.
It's like you go into this episode and it's like, you don't even like these people anymore, but you're like, I want to hang out with them though, you know? And so it's like this story, like there was so much juice left to squeeze, but the best shows generally with the best endings go out when there is still juice left, because that's why the ending is good, because there's still a lot for them to kind of like do. They haven't milked it dry to where they're just kind of like feeding you scraps at that point. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So
it's a challenging thing. I mean, I always compare it to professional athletes, you know, the all-time greats, and they get toward the end of their run and they can't let go. Right? They keep coming back. Jordan on the Wizards.
Yep.
You don't want that. You don't want that. Go out on top, leave the best possible image of yourself in the fans' minds, and that's what Succession has accomplished here. But yes, they did.
Yeah.
Just their door's a little tiny crack.
Yeah.
Little bitty crack. After the opening title sequence, we see Shiv updating Matsson on the board vote numbers situation, and Barrett, from the get-go, you could tell Matsson and our suspicions around Matsson potentially just using Shiv, they were going to be confirmed, and she was not, in fact, going to be named American CEO. I just thought his general vibe, his shiftiness, she was so enthusiastic, like over the top with it. She's very excited. She knows she's won. And he was just kind of like unwilling to get into that enthusiasm with her. He just was a little, you know, you could read it as nervousness that maybe it wouldn't go through. I read it as like, oh, this isn't his girl.
Yeah, and we've kind of called this for the last several weeks. And then I think just like, you know, the cartoon in the magazine, by the way, what a great piece of little production set design there. I hope that they made copies for both Sarah Snook and Alexander Skarsgård to like have framed and on their, just like
that's a great piece for them.
It's such an amazing, like this show just goes, it does everything. It does the details so well to have that magazine built out in the full spread, the profile of the two, of like Matsson and the perfect little cartoon drawing, the caricature of Shiv being the puppeteer and Matsson on the strings. He says that he thinks it's funny. He does not think it's funny. This is a bad sign. Like,
absolutely,
the fact that there is public perception that she is the puppet master is essentially a death sentence for her. And I just think, look, that ties in to everything that they've been doing. This has been a play for Shiv. She says that she'll be the puppet, but she wants power at the end of the day. And, you know, when we get more into this thing, it's like Matsson even says he doesn't want a partner. And that's what Shiv thinks she is. She thinks that she's an equal in this
partnership,
little partnership that they've got cooking here to get him the win, and that's not what he's looking for.
No, he's looking for that empty suit, which she calls Tom, and that's we'll get to that. But the way which Shiv just assumes, she's kind of cocky with it. She just assumes she's going to be the American CEO without really asking, without making anything actually official, without actually making Matsson say it in this scene.
He never says it. There's no paperwork.
Doesn't make him commit.
And get that paperwork, baby.
I think it's a big part of the reason he ends up abandoning her, because she is just, like he says, a little too much. A little too much. And yes, I think it's that she's pregnant and he finds himself attracted to her and not wanting to get into any more trouble over sex at work as well. But I think Shiv's heavy-handed style is not what he's looking for, like you just said. So the irony, of course, is that in this first scene of the episode between Matsson and Shiv, she is again throwing her husband under the bus, saying basically, hey, it's no big deal to fire Tom, calling him a highly interchangeable module part. Then she even goes further, saying, quote, Tom will honestly suck the biggest dick in the room. That's just her assessment, Barrett. And then there's, of course, the magazine Matsson is looking at that poses the question, is Lucas Matsson taking over the world, which shows a cartoon illustration of Shiv Roy as his puppet master.
So I think that, she is throwing him under the bus. She's definitely not going to bat for him. But I did think that there was a little bit of like I got the sense that she was doing a little bit of a reverse psychology as well.
A little bit.
Because she also makes the case for Tom here. You know, so it's kind of like she has to show that she's very cold and like doesn't care if he gets iced, but also but it's kind of like she, but like also he's like pretty talented, and
but it's obvious. It's an obvious ploy. That's the part of it that I think is like really it wears on Matsson, that she thinks she's so much smarter than she is. Like doing that sort of, well, yeah, you could just get rid of him, nobody would care, but also, he's done a good job.
Yeah.
He'll listen to whatever you have to say. I mean, she unknowingly sells Matsson on Tom taking the job she thought she was going to get, because she's like, he'll just go along with whatever.
Well, yeah,
you know what I mean?
A little bit.
As Shiv boards the plane to fly out to Barbados to her mom's house where Roman is holed up, it turns out, she calls Tom and tries to salvage the relationship.
Is this Barbados?
Yes.
Not Bimini?
I thought they said Barbados after the episode, but I could be wrong.
Was there an after the episode?
Yeah.
Oh, that didn't show up on my screen.
Oh, yeah.
Stupid Max.
Yeah.
WTF.
But she wants to save the relationship for the sake of convenience, right? It's not, she doesn't say like, I'm madly in love with you, I made a mistake, I want to rectify this. She says it would be incredibly convenient because, as Tom puts it, she would be married to her husband, right? The scheduling opportunities, Barrett, that's what she's after here.
I had a different read on this. I thought that this was maybe the first time that Shiv has ever actually been vulnerable with Tom.
She was a little bit.
I thought that this would... Look, Siobhan Roy is always going to couch it in something. She's always going to make the joke. She's always going to be sarcastic. She's never going to show her full hand of cards here. But the fact that she is calling and saying, like, I think we should make this work. Like, I want this relationship. And essentially giving him the power to say, I don't know, or no, is like a pretty giant step. And I think you can absolutely read on her face that it is something that she wants.
Yes.
Like she would like to save the relationship with Tom. And that is obviously very important as we continue the trajectory of this episode.
Yeah, she argues that because they've already said and done the worst things two people can do and say to each other, that they're kind of free. And, I mean, I agree with you. I think the look on her face tells you that she genuinely does want to mend this. But his response lets you know it's at that point, it's a little bit too far gone.
Yeah.
Or she doesn't do a good enough job of selling it like she hasn't with anything else this season, because Tom says he just doesn't know. And they leave it at that until the end of the episode.
Yeah, even if Shiv here in this scene, grovels or begs or says that she's in love or any of those things that you might expect from somebody desperate to save a relationship that is willing to go to a different level than Shiv is, like, I don't think that changes the math for Tom.
I don't think so either.
You know what I mean? Like, I think that what he's bumping up against is just the entire history of their relationship, of him getting thrown under the bus by her.
Yes.
Of all the slights and the baby stuff and the not being happy and the whole cocktail of every instance that she has not been vulnerable and that she has put on that armor and an extra suit of it after that. Like that's what it is. So
asking for an open marriage on their
wedding night, yes,
yeah.
like all
wedding
of that
night.
is what's built up for Tom. I don't think it's the fact that she's like, I think he knows that this is about as vulnerable as she can get, and it's a pretty big step.
He's gotten the hand back, Barrett.
But he definitely has the hand,
right?
Yeah.
Kendall gets intel from Hugo that Roman is with his mom. So after calling his mom to confirm, Kendall gets new Jess, as he calls her.
New Jess.
Got rid of Jess. New Jess. Maybe Jess did get that. We didn't see her, so I'm not sure if she still works there. I was a little concerned for her employment here. Because, her whole argument was like, I want a different position.
Yeah, Jess is going to land on her feet. I think she probably just got, reassigned.
Yeah.
But
who knows?
Either way, there's probably a great job waiting for her at Pierce. You know what I mean?
You would think so. So new Jess sets him up with a plane because it's time to go bag and tag Roman in what I believe to be Barbados.
Maybe Bimini.
When Shiv gets out there, she sees Roman's head is a little busted up, and Roman says he just had a discussion with some of her pals about the merits of liberal democracy. And they really play up Roman's injuries kind of throughout the episode, and he does, he says at one point, like, I was in a very violent fight, and I won, by the way. But it looks like he fell off a bicycle, not like he was, like, beaten to within an inch of his life.
Right.
He's just a big baby, this guy. Kendall finally gets a hold of Stewie, who tells him that Matsson has been meeting with other potential American CEOs, including Valter's Lawrence Yee from season 1, episode 1. It's the Valter guy.
The Valter guy.
And Kendall asks, what shape does that make? We get one final shape reference, and I fist pumped when that happened. He arrives out in Barbados, and Kendall is immediately concerned that Shiv has already flipped Roman. So there's no family love here. He doesn't even allow that to settle in. It's just straight to business, straight to the backstabbing and the maneuvering and move making, and it's classic. These three, right? He ends up telling Shiv that he got Stewie back. Oh, yeah, and also Matsson is talking to Lawrence Yee as a potential American CEO. And Shiv is shook here, but like refuses to acknowledge the chance that Matsson may actually screw her over. She really goes with like she's over the top confident that she's won. She even brings up the 100 and says she's willing to relinquish her part of the IP so that Matsson wins. Then the boys can go play with that, basically. Very condescending, very patronizing, and really just rubs Kendall in particular the wrong way. She's just very cocky. She says, quote, I played it better, so why don't you take it like a man and just eat it? And when you rewatch like I did this morning, these scenes are painful because she loses, obviously, on some level. We can argue that later, but it's just like she's so certain of herself and she's not willing to let any doubt in, even after Kendall has hinted that, or directly said that Matsson is interviewing other people for the job. She still believes she has it. Tom, meanwhile, is at an art show with Matsson. The colors go well, Barrett.
The colors, they go well.
They go well.
The colors
together.
go well.
Yeah. Greg's approval of his saying there. And he's freaking out, Tom is, that Matsson is going to fire him. And he gets on Greg's ass for not acting enough as social putty and like coming in and filling the awkward moments.
Right, yeah.
He tells Greg that he is fucked if Tom gets fired because he's the highest paid assistant in human history. We found out Greg's salary,
yes,
$200K.
Which was shockingly low.
I thought like $350.
Yes.
Yeah.
Minimum. Look, $200K, that's a great salary. Anywhere but New York City.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
There it's very average.
It's pretty, that's and the way that Greg lives life, you know what I mean? Like he's got a little shine on his shoes these days.
Oh, yeah.
And so I just thought for sure this guy was at like $500,000 already, the way that he was wheeling and dealing and climbing that corpo ladder. So this was a pretty, I was a little surprised, but it also kind of like, it does track a little bit that Greg is doing a little bit of like a keeping up with the Joneses bit.
For sure.
Probably, definitely just like not contributing any to his 401k and just spending every dollar that he makes.
Yeah, and I mean, if you think of it as like Tom as the head of ATN, probably making a couple million a year, something like that. Yeah. It would make sense that his assistant was at like a $200K mark, somewhere around there. So I thought it was fairly realistic, but just interesting that they gave us the exact number.
Yeah. And then just kind of like, goosing it up a little bit for this idea that Matsson's going to come in and he's going to be trimming budgets a little bit. And
down to like 50, 40K.
So, yeah.
It's a massive, massive pay cut. Like down to a third of what you were making or whatever.
Yeah.
Tom ends up at dinner with Matsson, where Matsson asks him to soft pitch himself. And Tom gets into basically what he brings to the table. He squeezes the costs, juices the revenue, follows the boss, digests strategy and implements. He cuts off heads and harvests eyeballs. He gives the customer what they want because he doesn't believe it's his duty to comment on their dietary wants or however he puts it.
He's not a nutritionist, man.
Right. He says, I'm a grinder. I grind because I worry. I worry all night about everything. And then I loved that he laid into these specifics around the consequences of the Mencken situation. He says, all the threats to me and my division and my physical body. He says he has a very high tolerance for pain and physical discomfort. And you can tell as you read into like both of their faces here during the, like he's saying exactly what Matsson wants to hear. He wants a guy who can handle his brashness, right? That can take being pushed around, being a lackey, being an empty suit. He needs somebody who's just going to do what they're told, but also work hard and make sure that costs are down and revenue is up. That's exactly what he wants. And Tom, sort of unwillingly, is doing a phenomenal job of pitching himself, right? He looks nervous as hell.
Yeah, he does. And he's always looked nervous in the conversations with Matsson.
And with anyone more powerful than him, really. It's the way that it reminded me exactly of how he used to talk to Logan.
Yeah. And I, we didn't have a ton of time to prognosticate and predict on last Monday's episode because the episode was long and we wanted to get through our breakdown. But as all of our patrons know, this is something that we talked about. Tom becoming CEO on Patreon. This was actually the way that our predictions worked was me saying that I thought all 3 kids would be left out. Then we talked about Greg becoming CEO. We said, no, that's stupid, but what about Tom becoming CEO? And then I let you convince me that Kendall was going to take his final form and win it all.
Yeah.
But like the first half of our Patreon conversation last week was basically us predicting almost exactly what happens. The order of things kind of shifted around a bit. And then the way it all shakes out was pretty, I thought, unpredictable and really nicely played, nicely executed. But yeah, what did you make of the Matsson lines here when he starts talking about how he wants to fuck Shiv and he's pretty sure Shiv would bang him too?
I thought it was 2-part. One, there was a kernel of truth to it. We've read into the sort of sexual chemistry in the air between the two of them since they had that private meeting.
A little buzz there, yeah.
And then 2, if this guy can handle me saying I want to fuck his wife, he'll let me do anything.
Yeah, I didn't even think about like the test portion of it until after the episode.
Yeah,
but that I think that was definitely a piece of the interview.
How big of a pushover is this guy?
Yeah, and I'm going to throw this massive curveball that should be offensive to any normal person.
Yes.
And let's see what this guy, does with it. And he lives in the discomfort. He accepts it, he takes it, and he moves right past it. And I think that was huge for his soft pitch here.
Yeah, it proved everything he just said to be true.
Yeah.
In an instant. Just to go over the finer points, Matsson tells Tom he thinks Shiv might be a bit too much between her pushiness with the India tactics and her being smart, which I think he sees as a not positive because he doesn't need more ideas. He has plenty of ideas. He doesn't need her political connections anymore, which he thought he would need, but it turns out that part is just easy. Like we saw him, kind of wade into those waters and not struggle with it. He got Mankin just like that.
Yeah.
And, also he wants to fuck her a little bit, and under the right circumstances, he thinks she'd fuck him too.
Yeah, and I think, again, what all of that pointed out to me was just the continuation of this idea that, like, look, Shiv's India tactics were good. Dropping those numbers in the middle of the election, like, hubbub was a smart move. He calls it a smart move, right? Or he acknowledges that she's smart. He just doesn't want her ideas. He doesn't care if they're good or not.
Yeah.
They're not his ideas.
Right, exactly.
So he's just...
And she doesn't pitch them in a way that allows for him to take credit. It's her.
So he's just kind of, like acknowledging that he's kind of this prickish, classic, stereotypical CEO type. Like,
a little bit of an egomaniac,
exactly.
right?
He doesn't want to hear... He doesn't want this, like, partner that he didn't ask for having good ideas and pitching things and pushing him to do stuff that didn't come from his own brain. He just wants to Elon this shit. And do whatever he wants, and then put his bulletproof vest, aka Tom, on. So
yes,
like that's what he's getting here, and it makes total sense.
I also loved that we wondered like what's the deal with this Ebba situation? Is this ever going to backfire and put Matsson in a corner that he can't get out of? Well, it actually ended up still playing into things because I believe he's being honest about one of the reasons he doesn't want Shiv is that he is attracted to her. Mm-hmm. He does want to engage in a sexual relationship with her, and he's trying to avoid any more problems on that front. Now, it doesn't make him a good person to admit that, but it is a little bit of truth from a generally what seems to be a bad guy, right? So he asks, or he says, why don't I get the guy who put the baby inside her instead of the baby lady? And he says he needs an American, doesn't want to scare the horses, ATN being the profit center. Mankin likes Tom, apparently, which is another big win if he, himself actually wins. Mm-hmm. And explains to Tom that he needs a front man pretty directly, and Tom is on board for all that, obviously. Like, this is what Tom has been doing the whole show anyway, right? He's kind of a fall guy. He's kind of a pushover. He does whatever it takes to climb the corporate ladder and climb the social ladder, and he's just gets to continue being Tom. He's not really having to stretch any here.
No, and this was also all like, it just nicely frames Tom's brutally honest moment in that room with Shiv a couple weeks ago where he's just like, I like this shit. I like the money. I like the nice things. And I don't really care about any, like, I'll do whatever, basically, to hold on to this.
Yes.
You know?
Absolutely. In his face, Tom's face, when it clicks for him that Matsson is genuinely considering him for CEO. Because for the first half of the conversation, I'm like, what's he playing at here? You know what I mean? I'm
Yeah.
Is he really about to do this? And is it going to be Tom? And then you see the realization when it occurs to Tom that, like, oh my God, I'm getting this job. It was a great, great moment. Great facial acting. Great scene between these two. And Greg ends up at the bar taking shots with Oscar and Matsson, where they start talking in Swedish. And he pulls out his phone and uses a translator app
Loved it.
to decipher their conversation about Matsson ditching Shiv, which is the direct result of when he's talking to Tom right after Tom finishes up with Matsson. Tom is like, I think I can save you, basically.
Right.
You're going to take a massive, massive pay cut, but I think you'll be okay. And Greg is sort of panicking because he hasn't been given any real assurances here.
Right.
And so he's doing the Greg thing where he gets this information out of the translator app.
He's sneaky, slimy little devil, that Greg, man.
He never stops.
This is such a cold-blooded move. I mean, it's just like, it's tactical. It's a good one. And these translators, they're great these days.
Turns out.
Like, this reminds me of if on the Google app, just the Google app, you can use the Google Lens and hold it up to language that's a foreign language, and it translates it for you right on the screen.
Yeah, to whatever language you pick.
It can even be like handwritten. It doesn't have to be like typed out. Like, so it can be like, the specials on a menu or whatever, and like it pops it up and just translates it for you right there. So technology.
It's an amazing thing,
Can
Barry.
really help you win in the game of Succession.
It can. Today's episode is brought to you by Bird Dogs. Bird Dogs makes the most comfortable and versatile shorts, pants, and bathing suits in the entire world. I've been wearing them for several years now. They cannot be beaten. I wear them to sleep. I wear them to do yard work. I wear them to work out. I wear them to go swimming. I wear them to do everything. They fit great, they feel great, and they look great. Phenomenal shape, Barrett. I've got the Art Fart Knockers, Duffy the Vampire Slayers, Uncle Bucks, and Teddy Rubskins, just to name a few. They've all got funny names if you haven't noticed. If you want to,
I don't know what my two pair are called, but they're gray and dark gray. So I'm sure they came up with something more clever than that.
Yeah, I don't think that's what they're called. If you want to look like money while you're doing deals, while getting in a quick 18, or perfecting the lawn of your immaculate estate, or swimming in your infinity pool this summer, Bird Dogs are the move, and their pants are great for the golf course, the boardroom, or the bar. #versatile. So click on the link in the description below to go to birddogs.com. Enter code DRAGON at checkout, and they will throw in a free Yeti-style tumbler with every order, like this one I am holding in my hand. That's birddogs.com, code DRAGON, to make sure you look good all summer long, and you'll get a free Yeti-style tumbler with every order. Birddogs.com, code DRAGON. Back in Barbados, Caroline tells the kids maybe this is the perfect opportunity to say farewell, to really open up a new chapter of their lives, let Dad and Dad's company go, move on from all this, right? Which, as she was saying it, I was like, God, that does sound like it would be good for these people.
It does really sound good for these people, and it's kind of prescient too.
It is,
right?
It is, indeed.
And it's also what they've like. At the end of the day, everybody loses, but everybody also wins because they are still rich beyond their wildest dreams, and
about to get a lot richer,
And the world is their oyster, man. It's like it's funny that you feel bad for anybody because we definitely shouldn't. But this is they've talked about this. This is like in the early days of the deal. This is like what they were kind of looking forward to. Even you even go back to like last season when Logan wants to buy Kendall out, right?
Yeah,
for the $2 billion or whatever, and it's like, yeah, this might be a good idea, you dipshits.
Move on with your life. No, and I mean, I think you just hit on one of the ultimate questions when it comes to Succession. Should you feel bad for the Roy kids? And I think either answer is correct, yes or no, and there's arguments for both. But at the end of the day, when I watch this episode play out and having considered the entire series, the thing that makes it untrue to me that the world is their oyster is that they are all extremely damaged, trauma-covered people, right?
Sure.
And they don't strike me as the type, regardless of how good Kendall's grief guy is, to go and get therapy, to go and do the healing and do the work, to be able to be free of everything their father left on them.
You are correct. They are not going to go make their own piles. But I'll rephrase. The world should be their oyster.
Well, but it is, yes, absolutely. And I think it's that thing that comes with, like, when you see I'll take it back to sports. When you see a professional athlete having a really hard time, and part of you is like, oh, this poor bastard. And then the other part of you is like, this motherfucker makes $20 million a year. Why do I care?
Yeah.
No one should feel bad for them. And it's that question, the ultimate question, like, does money, does wealth, does status remove the empathy that you should have for a human being, right? And that's it's one of the more important questions that this show poses, I think. So out at in Barbados, they bring in her husband, Carolyn's husband, Peter, the stepdad, and his friend Jonathan to pitch something. What exactly were they pitching?
I don't know.
I mean, you can tell they're just the
Peter is like Carl in previous seasons was like a low key, kind of like scene stealer.
Yeah.
Peter is a hilarious like little bit that the show runs with. Like whenever he's in scenes, it's for like 17 seconds, and then it's just like moving on with it. But the fact that he's got his buddy Jonathan down here,
they're like hiding in a bush 20 feet away, waiting to come in.
And don't they say like Jonathan's been like he's fallen on some hard times? His last idea didn't really work out, but now he's like really rounding into form on this new pitch that he's got. And of course, they're just like they just have this like naked desire to basically pry money.
They want to get in on
out of their newfound situation.
Yeah, they have a harebrained scheme, it seems.
Yeah.
To somehow carve out a piece of what's unfolding
they
here.
They see a shape for themselves.
Yes. They think they can find one.
With the Roy family fortune. By the way, I've done a quick bit of sleuthing while we've been chatting here, just because I think that we're both right. It sounds like they shot and filmed this in Barbados.
Okay.
But that they are supposed to be in Bimini, which is a British Virgin Island.
Got it. Great.
Now, maybe I'm wrong. Kendall definitely says when they're talking about the sharks that there aren't any sharks in BIM. B-I-M. So
I think you're right then.
That's why I thought it was Bimini, and it sounds like the house is supposed to be in Bimini, but that Reddit sleuthed out early, like when they were filming this, that they were filming in Barbados.
Okay, I think that's what they mentioned in the after the episode. So that's the way they were filming. Okay.
So I think we're both right. But
a nice island community.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But yeah. So Jonathan, it's just such a random little bit to have in here, but I just loved it because I think Peter is hilarious.
Well, it's also great how Shiv and Roman pretend to be taking him seriously, and like Kendall just immediately goes and takes a call from Greg, who lets him know that Matsson is indeed moving on from Shiv. And he starts that call by asking, if I give you something incredible, will you give me something amazing? And then I love they flip.
Yeah.
Where he's like, well, I've got something amazing. And Kendall's like, why? That's why I'm going to give you something incredible.
Yeah.
So Kendall pretty much immediately acts on this information. He pulls Shiv and Roman follows.
Who do you think he calls to verify?
Great question. I really don't know, because he's already gotten from Stewie that this was sort of maybe happening, that he was talking to the vaulter guy, right?
Yeah, by the way, the conversation that he has in the car with Stewie where they talk about Lawrence the vaulter guy, I had no idea what that conversation was about. I heard the name Lawrence from Vaulter, but I did not put any of this together until
after the fact.
Until the Matsson Tom conversation where it's obvious what's happening, and then with the Greg, he does the translation and calls Kendall. I didn't realize that this was already an idea that Kendall was hearing, basically.
He picked it up when he tells Shiv out there on the terrace, like, hey, by the way, I've got Stewie, and also you're out. Like he tells, like they're talking to the vaulter guy or whatever. That's when I started to piece together like what it actually meant.
Yeah. Okay.
But here he kind of makes it official because he tells Shiv, like, Matsson is screwing you over, and you can call whoever you want to confirm that they have erased her from the New Deal announcement draft, which obviously she ends up finding that email.
Maybe he calls Hugo.
Might have been Hugo,
he might have a copy of that draft that they're all looking at.
Yeah, so I think you're right in that he's probably called someone else who has that copy, right? So it could have been Carolina.
Could have been, yeah.
But whoever it is, he allows them the freedom to not respond. I guess to not implicate themselves in any way, and he gets the information he needs that way. So Shiv ends up screaming in a room on the phone trying to get a hold of Matsson. Her meltdown here sort of mimics the meltdown Kendall has at the very end of the episode when he finds out it isn't him. And it's a tough scene because, I mean, you're watching Kendall and Roman react to Shiv going and having this meltdown, and Kendall says that, like, Roman's like, we're back in this, basically. If she's not going to be the CEO and we have her votes now, or her vote, then we are back in the fight to potentially maintain this company in our family. And Kendall acknowledges, like, if she can recalibrate, then yes, we will be.
Yeah. And I'm thinking about the terrace conversation more as well. And I think that we probably did a poor job understanding how hurt Shiv felt by the Kendall Roman joint CEO pushing Shiv out.
Yes.
Piece of this.
Yeah.
Just because that's like that is the reason that she joins Matsson, the reason that she is double agenting the whole time, and the reason that she sits on that terrace and is so brash with her victory spiel, basically.
Right.
Because she does want to tell them to suck it because she feels so that she was kicked out by them
and betrayed,
and betrayed, basically. But yeah, this is it's always difficult to watch people get bad news.
Yeah,
and she's officially been played here.
I think part of the reason that we didn't harp on her reasoning for doing what she was doing with Matsson was that it's just the show. These kids all constantly stab each other in the back, right? But she definitely says it directly at one point in this episode. Like, you guys left me out in the cold.
Yep.
And what did you think I was going to do? Right. But she, after being broken by this information about Matsson going another direction and using her, she agrees to block up, as it were, with Kendall and Roman and attempt to kill Matsson initially, right? They get on the phone with Tellis, who basically tells them, look, you can't do a trio. Nobody's going to take that seriously.
Mm-hmm.
You need to pick one king, one crown, not the incredible fuck brother bandwagon, which apparently everyone calls them. And I don't think we'll be making that t-shirt, just for the record. But this scene with Kendall pitching himself as the next CEO, which felt like literally the 30th time we've seen him do that.
Which was very intentional, I think.
Yeah.
That this scene where here we go again. They're all going to say no, that they want it, but it should be me, but it should be me. Well, Dad told me this. Well, Dad told me this. And then Kendall saying, no, but it's me because it's birthright and I'm the oldest and I'm the only one that makes sense. I think this was supposed to feel
repetitive.
Repetitive. Yes. 100%. Yes.
Yeah, it was a circle of life just happening again and again. Roman says their dad said it should be Roman. Shiv says Logan offered it to her too. Kendall says Logan sat him down at the Candy Kitchen in Bridgehampton and promised it to him at 7 years old. The reason this one felt different to me than all the other times we've seen this stupid conversation unfold over the 4 seasons, it had real logic behind the Kendall choice.
Yep.
Roman doesn't even want it, can't admit it, but also he broke at the funeral. He's not able to carry the weight of what that job would be. Shiv tainted herself by joining Matsson's ranks.
Right.
They can't go to the board and be like, hey, she was for the other guy yesterday, but now she's the new CEO.
Yep.
Kendall's the only logical choice left. And so instead of it just being like this, oh, I want it, no, I want it, at least there was like solid reasoning behind his argument.
Yes.
And he ends up delivering it fairly well, right? I mean, in terms of just making the argument for why it should be him. And Kendall says, like, the reason he brings up the 7-year-old story thing is that their dad said a lot of things, but he said them to Kendall first. And Roman's like, oh, yeah, well, he said them to me last. And then Kendall gets into some honesty about, like, the difference between the two. He's like, look, man, you broke at the funeral, and maybe that means you're well-adjusted and I'm a business psycho, which is exactly how I would define him. He's a bit of a business psycho where he doesn't really have the human capacity for any other style of life other than that business psycho. So I was honestly completely bought in on Kendall here. I was like, wow. Maybe he's going to do it. Like, his explanation makes sense. It's the strongest one he's put forward yet. And Shiv yells out, "Hey, Rome, guess who Kendall thinks it should be? It's going to blow your fucking mind." I loved that line, kind of like self-referential in terms of how many times we've been through this. So on the way down to the beach, Kendall says Shiv can take ATN. That was another piece of this where I was like, okay, I could see this working. He wants to be CEO. He's going to take the top spot, but he's going to give Shiv ATN so she can do what she's always wanted to do, right? Fix it, make it so it's not just like fake news, if you will, or whatever. Try to make it an actually valuable place with some degree of integrity again.
Yep.
Save the world, as Kendall puts it. Roman is going to get all the social media so he can fuck it all up again. It'll be fun, Kendall says. And then Kendall goes for a swim while Shiv and Roman discuss murdering him and eventually swim out to him and tell him that they're anointing him. The back and forth with Shiv and Roman discussing killing Kendall was amazing. It like kept going so that you're like, oh, wait, are they serious? Oh my God, are they going to murder him? And then like goes long enough to where you get back to the joke again.
Yeah,
you're like, okay, this is just their way of dealing with what's occurring here. And it spoke to the inability of these three to be real with each other. Like they usually have to use a device or some level of humor or sarcasm or exaggeration to communicate because they frankly just don't have the communication skills that you have as a well-rounded and healthy person, I think. So they end up swimming out there. They tell him, "We're anointing you." And this was a really beautiful scene for some reasons. Now, in hindsight, it's incredibly heartbreaking. But like in the moment, seeing the three kids kind of come together again, Kendall get the huge smile on his face, knowing it's going to be him.
Yeah.
They head into the kitchen. They make him the meal fit for a king.
The kitchen scene was amazing.
Yes, all time.
It was probably my favorite scene of the entire episode. And when it was over, I looked over to Laura and I said, something terrible is going to happen. Because it felt too good. It was too nice.
Soon. Too good too soon.
It was too good too soon. And so I didn't really know how all that was going to shake out. I still wasn't able to predict what happened based off of that, but that scene was too nice and there was too much love there.
Yes.
You know?
That was the dead giveaway,
man. It was too warm, and so you knew that this in some way, shape, or form, this was not going to work out like they were intending here in this moment. But great scene. It was so nice. Roman with the cheese was amazing.
Oh my God, I was dying.
Making fun of Peter's cheese. And I can't stop licking the cheese, mommy.
Don't touch that. That's Peter's cheese. It's his cheese. Peter doesn't like the knobbies, so I freeze them. You know, the knobbies, the loaf ends. What? Why? I just like, all right, I also don't like the knobbies.
Yeah.
I don't like the knobbies. I throw the knobbies away. Why in the name of God would you collect the knobbies and freeze them? It was just like a mom thing, I guess. Like, there's a couple moments in this episode they let you know how weird Caroline is, where when Shiv shows up and Caroline is telling her,
oh yeah, she doesn't like eyes.
She doesn't like eyeballs.
That's right. The window to the human soul, I think they've been called.
Yes.
Yeah, she doesn't like those.
That's why she doesn't like them. Yeah, she can't handle it, right? But no, this was great. It was the last great happy scene between the three siblings before everything falls apart one more time, Barrett. And that's where, at some point in the kitchen, it was when they were working on making the smoothie, which was very like fraternity hazing,
right?
Was
the meal fit for a king. I knew as a cup of stuff.
Yeah. It was classic frat hazing stuff, where it's like, and in this case, we'll give you the crown, but you're going to drink this drink that we're making that might kill you, which was obviously in jest. But no, there was a high point where they're making the drink, the smoothie from hell, and Kendall is singing in the background still, meal fit for a king, that I knew. It struck me like a lightning bolt. Oh no. Because I had obviously said, you know what? I think it's Kendall's show. It's about Kendall.
Yeah.
I think there's a good chance he does end up on top. And everything was going too well.
Yeah.
And that's when it hit me like, oh, this is all it's gonna happen again.
Yeah.
We're gonna watch history repeat itself. These three will not be able to hold it together, and it's gonna hurt.
Yeah.
This last 30 minutes or whatever, watching it unfold.
Laura mentioned while we were watching, I'm an only child. She had, I thought, a nice insight that you could probably speak to, that like this was a fun scene because like with your siblings, you kind of always feel like a kid. There's that piece of it never leaves.
Oh, for sure.
And so I thought that was just kind of an interesting note that like you're kind of always able to reach this level, this kind of like base level,
childish,
with
fun, right?
With brothers and sisters, because it's just like such a inherent like part of your personship with them
in your relationship. No, it's like when I go back to my mom's house in Houston for Christmas, and me and my brother sit down and play FIFA. I mean, we're 15 and 10 years old again when that happens. Like, there's no difference. It's like a time machine. And I think these three have spent so much time together over the 4 seasons and on screen that they're able to perfectly emulate that vibe that comes out when I mean, you're right. It was the childishness was what made it so fun and also so brutal in the end.
And then I also just think it's like one more note that I wanted to add here was that there's been all these rumors and kind of murmurs, and some people have spoken a little bit about it or nodded to it, that some of the other actors, especially like the siblings and Brian Cox, like were maybe kind of annoyed by Jeremy Strong's general being
his method acting and insanity.
His method acting and insanity.
Yeah,
but all of it. One, I think Jeremy Strong is he's I'll keep going with sports references. He's Nikola Jokic out there, man. He like makes everybody better.
Yeah.
And
because he's a bit of an asshole. Yeah.
But because they're able to play off of him. But it also just works. It works for the relationship, for the on-screen relationship, because I think Sarah Snook and Kieran Culkin are like able to go there, to make fun of him, to kind of like rib him like that, because there is a little bit of that tension there. They do think he's kind of a dickhead,
a douchebag.
So it totally plays. And I mean, this scene just felt so lived in, so authentic, and it was awesome. But it felt too good.
Yeah. By the way, shout out to Natalie Gold, who plays Rava Roy, Kendall Roy's wife, estranged wife on this show. She followed all of our accounts on OCC on social media, and then gave my personal account a follow as well. So I have an inkling she may actually be here today listening to us. It's entirely possible.
Wow.
That's all I'm saying. But yes, kitchen scene, all time, one of the top, 3 moments of this episode.
Yeah.
And really of the series, where we at least get to enjoy these three characters in a positive light.
We see
together,
a little light. We see a little light here. Yeah.
Roman has been to hell and back. He feels like he's a little. This is his element. Licking cheese.
Yeah.
I mean, man, he licked that cheese good, man. He didn't miss a single centimeter on that cheese, Barrett. And
they should have had a Pepsi can out for him.
Yeah, that would have been a great callback. Great callback. And when they dump the whole thing on Kendall's head, like it was full child mode. Like no adult would do that to a kitchen, right? But these kids, they're really kids. Today's episode is also brought to you by you, our listeners, supporting us directly in exchange for ad-free exclusive episodes of OCC on patreon.com/oysters, clams, cockles. Subscribe on patreon.com/oysters, clams, cockles for as little as $5 a month to support our show and enjoy so much more exclusive OCC content ad-free. When you join, you'll immediately gain access to our entire backlog of episodes, including the 9 already existing hotline call-driven episodes of Succession bonus coverage, plus this week's finale bonus coverage when it comes out on Thursday, plus all of our bonus coverage for Season 1 of House of the Dragon, Season 1 of The Last of Us, and Season 2 of The White Lotus. But wait, there's more. You'll immediately gain access to our entire complete companion podcast for HBO's classic crime drama, The Sopranos, friendly to both first-timers and rewatchers, on top of all of our bonus coverage of Succession, House of the Dragon, The Last of Us, and The White Lotus. That's patreon.com/oysters, clams, cockles to support our show for as little as $5 a month in exchange for so much more premium ad-free OCC. Go now, support the pod, get more of the pod. Please and thank you. So, all 3 of the siblings head back to New York to take care of business. I loved that in the car ride away from their mother's house, Carolyn and what's her
Peter?
husband's Carolyn and Peter both remark. She's like, "Go away now, go." Like, yes. And he says, "What a fucking waste of time," because his pitch was completely ignored and fell flat. The 3 of the kids deboarding their private plane with they're all on their phones was phenomenal.
I think they also are back to. I think it's very intentional that they all look a little season 1-ish here.
Oh yeah.
Like
back in business mode.
Roman's back in like the dark colored dress shirt, and his hair's cut a little, feels like it's either cut or styled a little closer instead of the big kind of like floppy thing that he's been doing this season. And yeah, they're just all back in that like that initial kind of hard business mode.
We're right back where we started.
Or right
with
back where we
Kendall
started.
is the one who's expected to take over again, right? They go to their dad's former penthouse where Connor and Willa have set up a sticker system for dibsing Logan's former possessions.
Yeah.
Which was an interesting way of doing things.
Loved Shiv quickly making the shit. What are they fucking called? You know,
What?
like the. I'm sounding like a real dolt here.
I'm trying to
When you
save
do the
you, but I don't know what
when you do the initials for a long thing.
acronym. Yeah.
Thank you. God.
Yeah, she did it so quickly that I couldn't even I was like, wait, what'd she say? It was great though. She's basically the opposite of what Barrett just did.
Exactly. The exact opposite of the fool that I just made myself to be. Acronym. Yes. When she's just like quickly spouting off the acronyms when he's like, it's the sticker-based something in the something system.
Yeah.
She's like, oh yeah, the SBTPSBA.
Yes. Yeah, no, that was phenomenal. There was good humor in this scene. Connor, getting one last scene with Connor, I was hoping we would get some more of him. And we did, because it turns out Connor is going to Slovenia alone, and Willa is going to stay in New York. So they're going to do a long-distance relationship. They've been married for like just over a week, I think. And
The 2 week itch. The 2 week itch.
man,
Here it is.
They couldn't even let Connor have a happy ending. I think that's an important piece of this scene.
Yeah.
Is that, we all season long, we've kind of been like,
We've been pumping him up. Yeah.
championing Connor and Willa. Look, at least they're real with each other. They seem to have a good relationship. They're happy. But in the end, she has clearly finangled behind the scenes like, yeah, no, you can go to Slow.
Yeah.
I'll stay here in the $65 million penthouse.
With my new
my credit cards, living the high life.
With my Cal print couch that's yay big. That's going right over there.
Yeah.
And yeah, she's got it. She's going to do another play.
Right.
And
staying in her acting or her playwriting.
But loved a little bit of like the Shiv burn here, where she's like, "Oh yeah, well, Macon might not actually be president."
Yeah,
and, it sounds like things are going the opposite way. In fact,
right.
That the judge or the district or whatever that is dealing with the absentee ballots is like actually going to move against Macon, and it might flip to Jimenez here.
Yeah, we wondered if we would get a conclusion to this whole presidential election thing. We said that there was not enough time.
Right.
Obviously, it would be months, but it does sound like Shiv gives us the indication here. The Wisconsin court thing, as she puts it, is not going well for Mencken.
Yeah.
She kind of slaps Willa on the back like, you'll have them all to yourself. They watch a video of their dad from some amount of weeks ago, but relatively recently before his death, where he performs the losers list, I think Shiv called it.
Yeah.
What did you pick up on exactly what was it losing presidents?
Yeah. He's reeling off in some type of rhyme or limerick or poem every presidential candidate that lost.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
And then Jerry does a limerick, and then Connor does an impression of Logan singing I'm a Little Teapot, and then Carl sings the Scottish folk song Green Grow the Rushes O, which was like, it's just really warm moment. Again, we just had the whole kitchen thing, right? With warm moment with the kids. And this is one where you're including the appreciation of Logan Roy as a character. They're showing you a side of Logan that we have never seen before.
Yeah, not really.
Truly enjoying himself, letting business fall to the background, and just being a person. And seemingly enjoying himself with the only people he really had the ability to do so with.
Yeah, I thought it was notable that the kids
aren't there.
Outside of Connor are not at this dinner table.
Yeah, man. It was a nice tip of the hat to Brian Cox as well.
Yeah.
I thought a way to get him into that final episode to make sure his presence was really felt and that his performance is really acknowledged, because you see that emotion on his face as they're singing, as Carl is singing the song, and then other people join in, and it gets really powerful.
Yeah,
and he's
totally.
kind of, he sinks into that.
Yeah.
You can see it on his face that he's really, really kind of solemn.
And the emotion is obviously on the kids' faces as well. And it's
Kendall straight up cries.
Yeah, and it's super powerful because I think they are in that moment seeing, remembering dad fondly, right? But also there's like that, there is the piece of it that like, for whatever reason, like we were never really able to see this. He wasn't able to be like this with us, you know?
Yes. Yeah. And that piece existed at all.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's pretty bittersweet.
It was something. Right after that scene, Shiv tells Tom it's not going to be her anymore. And this is when Tom tells Shiv, it's me. It's going to be him.
It's gonna be me.
And at this point, I still doubted a little if it really was going to be Tom. Like the fact that he was telling her seemingly this soon, like with nothing that we've seen made official, with quite a bit of time left in the episode here, I was still kind of like, oh man, I wonder if it really will be Tom, because he seems so confident in delivering this to her. And I expect that anyone who is confident about a thing happening on Succession will not get to see that thing happen.
Generally, that has been true.
But her reaction, I also questioned, first of all, why he would tell her at all. It seemed like a not great strategy move from the standpoint of like, look, his relationship with this woman is not great. She's constantly wheeling and dealing in her own favor.
Yep.
And, but for whatever reason, he feels like this is the time to tell her. It kind of plays out perfectly in the end, but he's sort of almost rubbing her face in it, like, it's me.
Yeah.
You thought I was a big joke and that I'd get fired? Well, look at me now. I'm going to be the fucking CEO. And she snaps. She immediately stomps into the other room, tells Kendall and Rome that it is Tom. Tom takes Greg into the bathroom, and the Disgusting Brothers get into a slap fight, which is just another all-time scene here. I was like laughing, but also it was tense.
Oh, very tense. Yeah.
And both of them, first of all, I just want to say, I think Greg would beat the shit out of Tom in a full-blown fight. Like when they both kind of bucked up, like they'd both slapped each other, and then they both kind of like are just like reading each other, like, are we going to full-blown fight, or what's going to happen here? Greg kind of like gets up on his haunches, and I was like, this dude is enormous. Like he is like Tom is a big guy too.
Yeah.
But Greg he's just so tall.
I'm wagering on Tom here. I think Tom, he's got that dog in him. You know, he's from Minnesota.
You think he'd bite and scratch his way to the top here?
I do. He's lived through some cold winters.
Yeah, I could see him rip a nipple off or something.
Yeah,
you know?
Greg's a little soft, I think.
Too soft.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fair. It'd be a good fight.
I think it would be. Yeah.
It'd be a good fight.
But brothers don't fight. Brothers got a hug.
Yeah. Tom calls Matsson and tells him what's happening immediately. Like, we've got a big problem. And Matsson bursts into the room with his business zombies, as he calls them. He's like, phones! I want to see some fucking phones! And this was full Wolf of Wall Street from Matsson here.
Yeah.
Great scene. Then it is off to Waystar Royco's offices for the final showdown in the boardroom. And when they get into Logan's former office, there's this moment where Kendall is going to assume his new desk for the first time. They stop and they give you the opportunity to soak in just how big this is for him, to sit where his father once sat at his desk. Big shoes, Bear. Yep. Big shoes.
Big shoes.
This was the other moment that I realized
big shoes.
He was going to lose. That there was no chance that it was actually going to come to fruition.
Big shoes.
Roman sees Jerry walk by, and it causes him to have an almost total meltdown.
Yeah.
He begins the downward spiral, though, to all of this not working out right here. Roman does. And he asks repeatedly, why isn't it me? Like, he still doesn't get it. Like, how did this not work out for me? I thought I played it perfectly. I thought I have what it takes. And there's the strangest moment between Kendall and Roman where he hugs Rome.
This is the scene that I am most interested to go back and watch very closely with subtitles, but continue because I agree with you.
Just trying to figure out exactly what the dynamic was.
Here.
Yeah. No, and this is like my wife was asking, like, what is this? What is happening right here? She said, what? We have 2 kids that are under 5. She said, why is he pressing on his boo-boo? And that was when I was like, thank you, honey, because I think what was happening here is that Kendall is hugging Rome, and by pressing his forehead wound directly into his shoulder as hard as he can, he is emulating the physical pain that Logan inflicted on Roman, just like Roman was emulating that by getting himself beaten up in the street. It was kind of this like half abusive, but also sort of triggering in a good way thing for Roman because he is this beaten down puppy dog like we've talked about.
Yeah, okay.
But he purposefully busts the stitches on his head.
Yes. That part was clear. And that scene kind of ended. He kind of releases Roman, and Laura goes, "Man, that was cold." And I said, I think he kind of wanted it.
I think he did.
Like, because he's looking down at the glass, the mirror in the bar cart or whatever that is, and he keeps talking about his wound, about how it doesn't look that bad. It doesn't look that bad.
Almost like he was asking for him to make it look worse.
Right. And that is like somehow triggering him to think about like, well, if it doesn't look bad, then it should be me as CEO.
Well, if
he's
I
making
thought it
some
was,
type of connection there.
I thought the connection was if it doesn't look bad, people are going to think I'm just a pussy and that I didn't get this done, but like it's not even really that bad of a wound. Sort of like, hey, please open this up so people will feel sorry for me instead of thinking about how I messed this up. Yeah, basically.
And so he's fixated on how it looks okay, and that's bothering him basically, and and he doesn't want to show up because it looks okay, and so like he doesn't really ask, but Kendall takes him and basically fucks his wound up.
Yeah, makes it look bad.
And it's almost like he's giving him I totally agree with you. He's doing a little bit of a Logan thing here where he knows that Roman almost like has this masochistic tendency to like seek out the pain. Yes. Basically. And is also giving him the out well, now you're going to show up and it's going to look more fucked up, right? Like it's going to be noticeable that something happened here, so you can have that. But it was a weird scene. Yeah,
gives him the excuse though, and it gets even weirder when Roman is walking out, seemingly somewhat comforted by the whole situation, and Kendall says, "It could have been you. It could have been you." Like tells him a couple of times, like reassuring him, like different circumstances. Right. This absolutely could have been you. It's just me because it has to be, basically, right? Like trying to take all of the guilt and shame out of Roman not accomplishing what he set out to accomplish. Then it is time for the boardroom vote. And I got goosebumps as everyone's filing into this room. And this is like the final showdown. Everything, this entire series built to this moment. And basically Frank opens it up and says, like, here's what we're doing. We're voting to sell to Gojo today. But of course, our co-CEOs have a pitch on why we shouldn't do that. Now I'm going to give the floor to Kendall Roy. And Kendall does an outright pretty terrible job of explaining why the deal is a bad deal. Like he says, if you want it to go through, you'll have to fire me and find someone else to take it through. And he briefly explains, like, we think that Matsson is flailing and that this is not something we should do. And then that's kind of it. He says he doesn't think anybody in that room is going to change their mind based on what he says.
And everybody, especially Kendall, is teed up to just get to the vote. They all think that they have the right numbers. So let's just basically skip the niceties and the formalities and just get to the vote.
I just thought it was one last failure for him, where this was an opportunity to try to flip it so that you're not relying on one vote, which is what ends up happening.
Yep.
And try to get somebody else on your team. And instead, he's just like, let's go straight to a vote. He's overconfident with it.
Yep.
And he doesn't think he needs to sell it. So everything appears to be going as planned as far as individual board members voting, like the way we anticipated. And it gets to Roman, and he kind of freezes up for a second. And you're like, not again. Yeah. Like, are we just going to do season 1 all over again? Please, not again. He ends up voting for Kendall, though. And then it gets to Shiv. And it's off to the races, Barrett. She can't, as she puts it, she cannot stomach it. She gets up. It's 6-6 when they hit Shiv. She is the final vote to secure everything that Kendall has worked for. Everything that he's been wanting since we started watching the show, season 1, episode 1. She gets up and she leaves the room. Kendall follows her into another office. Roman follows Kendall. I would note it is an all-glass office, so everyone can see straight into it, right? And you can even hear it's not completely soundproof. Shiv tells Kendall a lot of different things, among the fact that she loves him, but she can't stomach him. She says point blank, I don't think you would be good at it, which is kind of an audience avatar situation, I think, where it just, on paper, the guy is not great, not very business savvy, and Kendall brings up, like, if you don't let me do this, I think I might die. And her final blow is, you can't be CEO. You can't because you killed someone. And that whole thing that we didn't even know, like, will this play a part? Do we think they'll go back to it?
Yeah.
It ends up being the death blow, no pun intended, because when Kendall denies that it ever happened, when he starts the backpedaling, like, I made that up to create a bonding moment. It was a false memory. I wasn't even there. Roman, at that point, is so disgusted with Kendall that it doesn't even matter if Roman believes him or not that he made it up. It's that he would renege on it, that he would manipulate them using something so important and so much emotion. That's one of the most famous scenes in Succession history, where Kendall breaks down and Shiv and Roman comfort him.
Yep.
And Roman flips here.
Yep.
This is when he's like, no fucking chance, man. Like, he's completely flipped onto Shiv's team, that this guy cannot do it. He says, that's when Kendall yells out, I'm the eldest boy. I'm the eldest boy. And Shiv goes, you're not. Because he isn't.
He isn't.
Connor is. It's been one of the jokes from since the first season, where you're kind of like, this guy assumes this role, this title of like eldest son. Like, that is the birthright, right? But it's not even really his. That's not really the eldest son. Roman then crushes Kendall here by saying that Shiv is actually the bloodline now because she's pregnant. She has a continuation of the Roy family bloodline growing inside of her, and that their dad's view was that Kendall's kids weren't real. He says, quote, they're a pair of randos. One is a buy-in, the other is half Rava, half some filing cabinet guy, which I had kind of forgot. Like, but the implication here is that, like, we knew the one kid was adopted, right?
I had not recalled that.
I mean, his daughter that was pushed in the street is, I believe, a person of color. And that's part of the reason that played so heavily into what was going on with her. And this implication is that the other kid also, not Kendall's, that they did some kind of a sperm donation situation. Basically implying, like, you're impotent, you didn't have kids, she's having a kid, you don't even have the bloodline locked down, which sends Kendall into a full-blown meltdown. Like, physical altercation ensues, the wheels come off, it is all over in this moment. And he grabbed, like, the way he grabbed his head looked like he was trying to do what the mountain did.
He was doing the mountain.
Where he was like, I'm going to pop you like a grape, basically, right?
Yeah, proving that that within the Succession universe, they have all seen Game of Thrones.
Yes, and proving that, of course, he is not fit for this job. Like, everyone can see this. He's screaming, that you get that view from outside of the room that they're in that lets you know everybody can hear what he's yelling. It is tough to watch this particular scene.
Yeah, there are, look, we can start talking a little bit about landing the plane and, like, big finales and, like, who's able to sink the shot, basically. And the show is summed up in this scene.
Yes.
Everything comes to a head right here within these glass walls in this room between these three kids. Like, this is it. This is everything that the show has been saying. It's the answer to all the questions. It's everything, and it was done in a way that was like, they were telling you a little bit. Like, there is some, like, writing here, like, essentially when, like, Roman is talking about how they're bullshit, they're all bullshit. It almost sounds like it's coming from the writer's room, right? But it also makes sense for Roman to be saying that in that moment, so it really works. It does kind
perfect, yeah.
It does both, and it works that way. And it's devastating. This scene is absolutely incredible, and the way that Kendall is reduced to, like, this mewing, entitled 7-year-old child fighting with his brother, putting his hands on his face, screaming about a birthright that's
who he really is, man.
That's who he really is, right there.
Now, I thought it was the realest scene in the whole series, where Roman sits down on the top of the couch or on the desk, whatever he's sitting on, and he says that they're bullshit, they're all bullshit, that Kendall is bullshit, that he's bullshit, that Shiv is bullshit, and that it's all nothing. And he even levels the company. He says, like, it's fucking fake news and pieces of gum holding shit together or whatever. Like, it's the facade and the curtain are brought down,
fully ripped down here. Yep.
Where what we have been saying and arguing and wondering if it was true the whole series long. Like, are any of these kids actually legit? could any of them really do this job? Are they all just morons? Like, is the whole point of the show that Logan's entire life was dedicated to this corporate ascension, and as such, his kids were left in the wind and they suck as humans now? And that really is that's the end message, and that's what makes, look at the title of the show, man, Succession.
Yeah.
Who will succeed this man? None of them, because he didn't give them the tools to do so. And Roman admitting all of that, you feel like he is free of it in that moment.
You do.
Like if anything, honestly, out of those three kids, Roman somehow comes out on top, like in a way, most free of it all. I think
he does. I agree. He feels most free of it all, and that tracks a little bit with the fact that initially he was the one most willing to send this deal through, right? You know, I think Shiv was there too, but Shiv had her own kind of play with it all. Roman was the one that was that felt fully like, this is what Dad wanted. Let's just make his final wish happen,
and we can go do the 100.
And we can go do our own thing, and like we can be free of this. And so for him to, the only reason that he was sucked back in is because he had not actually pre-grieved, right? Because of he was filling this void, with more bullshit. And it's like, now that he has actually begun the grieving process, that he has broken down and cried and acknowledged the death of his father and like all of this, he is the one that actually seems most poised to potentially move on from.
No, I mean, we could talk about where he ends up right now since we're here. You see Roman go into, well, first of all, you know, he obviously signs the papers or whatever. We'll talk about that scene briefly, but he ends up in the bar, right? He gets a martini and he smiles. And I think there was two things to that smile. One, that is what Jerry orders. She's a martini girl. I think he's still thinking about her a little bit.
Okay.
But also, he's right back where he started the show. He's finally out. He wasn't in at the beginning of the show. You remember? He didn't have anything to do with this. He was the one that was like living an outside. Kendall was the only one involved in Waystar. Shiv was in politics. Roman was a billionaire playboy drinking in bars and telling pervy jokes, as they put it in the after show. This is like a full circle moment for him, where he got into this thing. He thought he might be able to take over the family business. There was a bunch of different variations of that, and then now he's out and he feels clean of it. I think he's free of it. I think he's, like you said, that mourning process, the grieving, it did begin. There is some version of a healthier Roman Roy here that we see in the end. And that I did not expect.
Yeah.
I mean, I was very concerned he might not survive the season after last week's ending.
Yeah.
But no, you end up feeling a little bit, not as a person, but you feel a little good for this character who has escaped this fucking nightmare world.
Well, it's you know, you talked about how Shiv is kind of the audience avatar here when she begins tearing the curtain down and is basically like, you know, you're not good at this. You wouldn't be good at this, and you killed a guy. It's like it is sort of an empowering moment for the audience to finally have one of the kids acknowledge what we've always kind of known deep down, or even on the surface, which is that these kids are not serious people.
Right.
You know, that they are bullshit.
Yeah. Confirms all of Logan's final statements.
So it's just like, yeah, finally, you can say it. It's just like a little bit of self-awareness is very gratifying.
It was therapeutic.
Yeah.
Because that's often how therapy works. It's like saying something that you never wanted to admit and then getting freedom from it. So Kendall goes back to the boardroom with his hair all disheveled, and he tries to adjourn the meeting. He's like, all right, well, let's go ahead and adjourn for the day. And Frank is like, Ken, it's over. 7-6, you don't have it. We sell to Gojo. And Ken walks out of the building with the 1,000-yard stare, right? Just all the way to the elevator, all the way down. And
I was really glad he didn't hit the up button on the elevator, by the way.
Yeah.
Because I was ready for that.
Well, I got some more thoughts on that too. But before we get there, right as Kendall goes out, in strolls Tom Wamsgans, the new boss man. And
looking very boss-like, I might add.
Oh, dude, he's got the squad behind him. That's the best thing about being CEO. There's like 7 underlings that walk right behind you. He does several things here, though. Hugo comes up and tries to like get in Tom's good graces. Mm-hmm. Tom immediately asks him where Carolina is. He's picking Carolina over Hugo. Carolina had recently asked, like a couple minutes ago, asked Shiv, hey, can we get rid of Hugo? Basically.
Yeah.
So Hugo will be out. Carolina will be in. Jerry will be sticking around.
Yeah, bringing back Jerry into
She
the
knows her
fold.
way around in the dark.
Mm-hmm.
She was fired twice. She still survived. Frank and Carl, both dead. He doesn't need those old coots hanging around his neck.
Oh, my God. I loved the little moment between Frank and Carl, though, which I thought was also just very, like, on brand for these two when Frank says, so, like...
Golden parachute?
Or, like, one last ride around the rodeo or whatever he says.
Yes.
And Carl is like, I don't... I mean, you know, like maybe let's give it one more go. Like, these guys... Like, everybody, these guys especially, they're the real ones. They're the real ones that can't give up the game.
Yeah.
Like, they are serious people that are in the game almost compared to. I mean, they're a bunch of bullshit too for the most part. But like, they've actually done it. They've done the job. They've done the job, and they didn't get there because their last name was the same as the guy that started the company. You know what I mean?
Yes, for
so
sure.
It's like,
they're real players.
They're real players. Even though they are sometimes jokes as well, or the butts of them. But I just loved them being like, yeah, maybe we'll stick around for a little while.
Yeah, and I went so far as to say, like, wait, what would the motivation be? And I think the argument is that, like, well, you've got the golden parachute, the stock price is what it is right now, but what if this dude crushes it and it gets even more valuable? Maybe you could buy a second island in Greece or whatever, right?
Maybe so.
Greg then approaches Tom. He's concerned for his job, rightfully so. And I thought Tom was going to eviscerate his disgusting brother here. I was so antsy because I didn't want to see them break up, if you will. But Tom sticks that sticker on his forehead to claim him, and it was just a perfect moment there. So Greg will continue Gregging for Tom, and Tom will be Tomming for Matsson, which I thought was...
There's still a note about Greg's salary potentially getting a little bump.
Oh, yeah,
bump down, I think.
I think that's his punishment for betraying Tom and telling them that Shiv was out, telling the other side. He will get busted down. I think his salary is going to be in the toilet, but...
Okay, I liked this moment, too. You obviously got to... I mean, these two, right? I mean, just the ride that they've been on. But we were talking about this last week with, like, the Matsson Shiv thing. You know, how Matsson kind of knows, well, Shiv is double agenting. What's to say that she won't go do that again? Like, at this point, Tom knows that Greg gonna Greg.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, that's why he's got to bust him down, though.
So, like, how can you trust Greg anymore? Greg needs to earn the brothership.
But here's the thing.
The brotherhood back.
If Greg gets canned right here, he might as well be back in that Dodrick costume. He has no prospects.
Right.
He has no other business connections.
Yeah.
No acumen. This is all he has. So he's going to be Tom's reek at this point. Like, he'll have to do whatever this dude says. He's busting his salary down to, you know, basically suboptimal levels in New York City, especially.
And Tom will have full hiring and firing power at this point. So,
yes. So he's going to be extremely beholden to him. I think he'll be like the most Greg that he's ever Gregged, right? Yeah. So it makes sense. And I think he really does love him. I think
Greg mocked too.
Yeah.
But he's fucking sexy.
Yeah. Yes. And I think Tom and Greg's relationship is probably one of the most interesting on the whole show. I mean, there were 2 TikToks that went viral last week. One of them was explaining how they thought Tom Wamsgams would end up on top because he...
Of the World Series baseball player?
Yeah, Bill Wamsgams, who made the only unassisted triple play in the history of the World Series.
Yeah, I saw that this morning.
I refused to watch it. It got sent to us like 150 times before the finale, like over the course of last week. That ended up being true. It's still a little silly, I would note, but it does seem it might have been where they got the inspiration for his name. The problem is Tom was named Tom Wamsgans back in season 1. Mm-hmm. They didn't know they were going to put Tom on top in season 1. That was a decision that Jesse Armstrong says he made some time ago, but not before the show aired. Like, you know what I mean? So I think it's more coincidental than anything. It was still a great TikTok. My other one, the other TikTok that went viral, and the one I enjoyed even more, was the one shipping Tom and Greg as lovers.
I saw this one last night.
This is like, it reminded me of if you watch one of those like Lord of the Rings, Frodo and Sam cuts where it makes them look like lovers. But I probably watched it 50 times because it was so damn funny. I loved it.
I guess I can't even remember if we ever acknowledged this. While I don't personally consider Tom the villain, the whole iPhone thing, the fact that he was the only one without an iPhone, does seem at
Like
least,
it backed out here,
at
right?
least notable here. As
Weird move, though.
as some type of sign, basically.
Yeah.
Right?
I think so. I think that's fair.
Like it was at least some type of clue that he was the only one without. It was something different about him. It was something telling.
Yeah,
basically.
we discussed on Patreon mostly. I think we may have mentioned it on our regular show, but on Patreon we discussed this long-running theory that actually came about as a result of the guy who makes the Benoit Blanc murder mystery series. What's one of those movies called? Glass Onion. The Glass Onion guy came out and said, Knives Out, yes. Came out and said, you're not allowed to use... villains are not allowed to use iPhones in Hollywood productions. That Apple has a policy that you can't have a villain use an iPhone. And Tom was one of the only characters on this show who has an Android.
Yep.
And as a result, people were like, "Oh, it's gonna be Tom." Tom's like there was another thing people pointed to.
Yep.
And I'm with you. I still don't see like how is he the villain? They're
he's
all
not.
bad guys.
Yeah, he's not. I do not consider Tom the
right?
villain.
But it does seem it played some role. So who knows, man? I still put no credibility behind that theory personally because it sounds too insane from like an execution standpoint. Like, what is Apple going around watching every movie and TV show like? Oh, iPhone on the villain character. File up the lawsuit. Like what?
Or you have to send like scripts to Apple to be hey, can this guy have an iPhone? And they're like, oh no, he crosses the villain threshold,
right?
Which is a scientific formula that we have.
And there's like a jury that votes on that. Is this character bad enough to not carry an iPhone? Like I don't see it. I do think there may be some version of it where if you're doing a partnership with Apple and they are giving you product to use, then maybe they say like, hey, don't give the iPhone to a serial killer rapist or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yep.
But even on Apple shows, somebody gave the example that Steve Carell's character on The Newsroom is apparently a villain, and he has an iPhone. That's an Apple TV show. So
well, they're allowed to break their own rules there on.
Yeah, see, and there's always an argument, and I get it. There are people who are like, fuck you, Ross, it's real. I know, we're just not going to end up in the same camp on this one, and it's fine. I've been arguing this for like 3 months straight, nonstop. So, but yeah. No, Tom and Greg's relationship is a huge...
intact and
one of my favorite parts of the series, honestly. Roman has to go in and sign the paper right next to Matsson, and he really, really doesn't want to do it. They have to, like, force him to do it, basically.
Yeah. Mostly because he doesn't want that photo to be taken because he's 1.5 feet shorter than Matsson.
Yeah, it's going to make him look like a little fella. And his head doesn't look good in this. That's a bad photo for Roman, frankly. Not his brightest moment there.
Yeah.
And then we get this shot of Tom Wamsgans walking out to his, I think it's like a Navigator. What is this SUV?
Okay, I mentioned the SUV too. It's a Mercedes, and I literally said, I was like, I don't know what that Mercedes SUV that they keep rolling around is, but it's tight.
It's sick.
It's very sick.
Yeah, daddy-like.
Yeah.
But they give the shot from behind that is just like the most Logan-esque shot of Tom that you're ever going to get. It's the back of his head, walk into the car. He's got people on either side of him. It's like he's been anointed king at this point. Like he's walking through his court. And he doesn't even have to open his own car door anymore. Somebody does it for him. And he slides into the car next to Shiv. Shiv congratulates Tom.
Who he had said earlier, like, I have a car in 20.
Yeah, come out and meet me.
If you'll meet me. And she kind of like shakes him off a little bit.
And then she's out there.
Then she's in the car.
She's in the car. They start driving away out of the building. And Tom puts his hand out on the middle console. And she sort of just lays her hand on top of his. Mm-hmm. They're not holding hands.
No.
But they're touching hands.
They're touching hands.
Right? Which is, I think, as far as that couple is going to get, perhaps, moving forward. But there was a lot to say about the way this shit went for Shiv and Tom.
Look, we kind of glossed over this talking about the vote because the fight between the siblings kind of supersedes it and takes hold. But like, yeah, man, Shiv chooses Tom there. That's a huge piece of it because we were just talking about this a moment ago, right? Like even earlier in this episode and every moment prior to that in the series, she throws Tom under the bus. She's willing to sacrifice Tom. She will send him to prison. She will fire his ass. She will not let him freeze the sperm or whatever.
Carry on affairs. Have an open marriage.
All of that. Like he is constantly been kind of railroaded by Shiv in all of her decision making. And after that phone call that they had earlier, where he essentially says that he doesn't know if he wants this back or not, That was her fighting for the relationship. She hands him the keys to the kingdom.
Yes.
Now, I love the, of course, subversive wrinkle here, which is that by choosing Tom, she actually stays closer to power than she might otherwise have been.
Absolutely.
So there is also that, and you don't actually know.
Well, it does stay in the family, right?
But it stays in the family, and and she lets Tom win. She gives him the hand, and this is like this that is a, if there is anything that can fix that will convince him to, to repair that relationship or continue the marriage, like that is as big of an olive branch as she can give him.
We joked about the hand earlier, him getting some hand back in the relationship, and that old George Costanza saying from Seinfeld. But their dynamic flips entirely here. Tom and Shiv from the beginning, season 1, episode 1, through the whole series. This is the first time Tom is on top. Like, he's the one with the power.
Yeah.
He's the one with the job. Now, the succession element of it is that the child growing in her belly that is his could one day come and still take over Waystar, right?
Yeah.
Like, it still could maintain, or at least the ATN element of it. That's the other thing. It's the most partial victory she could have achieved, where her husband is still in power on some level. No, they don't own the company anymore, right? But she's still going to get a multi-billion-dollar payout here, it sounds like, because of her board seat and her stock. And on top of that, Tom still is going to be head of ATN. She has salvaged her marriage.
He's CEO of Waystar.
Yeah, CEO of Waystar. I forgot. American CEO altogether. So it still creates a situation where she has, if you look at it in this light, won in some way.
Yeah. Yep.
Now, I would still argue Roman won the most because he's out and free and clear, and he's also not married to somebody who has a very toxic relationship with. I don't see things ending happily for these two, but it's certainly a very interesting wrinkle that Shiv picks Tom Wambsgans. That's the other thing, that when they're having this argument in that room, the office, the three kids, and they're yelling and the physical shit breaks out, why the hell wouldn't Kendall say, "You're picking Tom"? Like, 'cause she's like, I don't think you'd be very good at it. Well, the person she's picking instead is Tom, and nobody attacks the fact that, like, why would Tom be good at this? It was crazy to watch that all unfold. There's also a moment in that room where Kendall goes after Shiv, not to like hit her, but to physically grab her, and Roman peels Kendall off of her and says, "She's fucking pregnant, you asshole," or something like that. And then that's when they start like wrestling. Which I just thought was like another low for Kendall. Like, put his hands on his pregnant sister, right? But yeah, the Tom-Shiv relationship, the dynamic here, the way it ends with the shot of them touching hands, driving away in the car in silence, was magnificent.
Yeah,
it was great.
Yeah, and I mean, look, I think anybody's guess is as good as ours here about what the rest of their relationship looks like, because as noted, like, they have gone into the bag you don't touch. Now they're arguing that makes them stronger and freer and clearer than ever. But
I doubt it.
But it's hard to put that cat in the bag.
It is,
as it were. And but yeah, I think I'm gonna take the optimistic view here and say that there was progress made on all accounts, that Shiv was able to say what she wanted in her cryptic form early in the episode and show a little vulnerability, and then finally kind of like chooses not to kill Tom here, not to throw him under the bus, to choose his needs, desires, wants kind of over something else that would have kept the power in the Roy family, would have kept the company under their name, not Matsson's or Tom's or whoever else's. And so I think that was definitely, that felt like progress. That felt like, giving something to him. Felt like making a sacrifice.
Compromise.
But yeah, as you said, also a relationship with plenty of toxic history. So honestly, who knows?
Good luck to the Wambsganses. I spent a lot of time asking myself why Shiv does what she does, and I think we just answered the first half of it, which is that, well, she's actually giving power to Tom, right? And she is conceding something here in an effort to save her marriage and maintain some level of connection to her father's company and her family business. The other thing, I think, is that she sat there in that boardroom, she watched Kendall at the head of the table, she watched the vote go around, and she decided, this has to end. In the same way that Jesse Armstrong decided this has to end.
Yeah.
The cycle that these three had been going through for 4 seasons,
Sure.
trying to fight with each other and who ends up on top, and it had to stop.
Yeah.
This would break that cycle. It would go back to what their mother said earlier in the episode. Like, wouldn't it just kind of be nice to let this horrible man buy the company and, like, you all get out from under this?
Yeah.
And I think Shiv decided in that moment, like, you know, not only am I throwing my husband, who I have a very broken marriage with, a bone here, possibly rectifying things, but also I free myself and my 2 siblings of what is clearly destroying us.
Yeah.
Like, these 3 people are not built for this. Kendall even says to Rome at one point back at the old island house, their mother's house, "You aren't that guy." And it reminded me of that, like, "you aren't that guy, pal" meme.
Uh-huh.
But none of them are. They're not. They're bullshit. They're not serious people. And I think Shiv finally, in the same way that Roman is able to admit to Kendall, like, all the things that they say, all the things that he says, Shiv is finally able to admit herself, like, this has to fucking stop. Like, this cannot just keep going like this. Kendall cannot be the head of this network. She knows what that will mean for a lot of it. I mean, he can't be the head of the company. She knows what that will mean for the company, what that will likely mean for him. Let's be real. It probably wouldn't be good for Kendall Roy to be the head of Waystar.
Yeah, and I mean, the cycle is something that we also talked about on last Thursday's Patreon episode when we were talking about, you know, the shape of things if Kendall were to take over. And one of the things that we talked about was, you know, there were a few options if Kendall did make it to the top. And I thought that the first one was that he loses everything because he has to completely cut and bury the connections with his 2 siblings and Rava and everybody else. He would have to sacrifice all of it to make it there. And that's clearly not going to happen halfway through the episode when his siblings essentially anoint him and say okay. So that was the other option that we had talked about, right? Is that Kendall makes it to the top, keeps his siblings within the company, and essentially, like, the message at the end of the day is that nothing ever really changes, and that we move forward here with Kendall at the top, but knowing good and well that the fight continues.
And the vicious cycle continues forever.
The vicious cycle continues because none of these 3 can ever say and be happy with, like, okay, it's not me.
Right.
They're always going to fight for it if they remain inside.
Right.
And so that's where it was kind of heading, I think, if, like you're saying, if she does vote with Kendall there, that's what she's subjecting them to, is the continuation of the scrapping and the fighting and the bullshit.
I think you're exactly right. And I'm guaranteeing that was the other option that Jesse weighed as the writer of the show, as the creator of the series. I think that they probably had a lot of discussions about what was the most impactful way to close this thing out, and I bet you that was one of the ones they mulled over.
So, yeah, sorry.
But they end up using it to tease us sort of instead, like halfway through, right?
Right. You ready to talk Ken?
Kendall walks through the park in a daze, still got that 1,000-yard stare. Shockingly, Colin is following him.
Following him,
For some reason, I was like, well, once he's out at Waystar, like, Colin obviously won't work for him anymore. But I think that's more of like a personal hire, right?
Yeah.
So he walks out, he sits down on a bench, he's staring out at the water as the Succession theme song crescendos. Then the music cuts. We hear the waves lapping as the camera focuses on Kendall with Colin in the distance. Cut to black. Game over. It is my personal opinion that it's in a similar vein to other shows that have closed with abrupt, open-ended conclusions.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Kendall Roy survives. I could see the argument being made that he kills himself right there. I don't think there's enough distance on that bridge. I think it would have to be like a self-inflicted gunshot wound. But I thought it was super ominous. He's broken. He brought up, I think I will die if you don't give me this. Mm-hmm. He has lost everything. He has no relationship with his estranged wife now, who is trying to protect her kids from him and the monster that he is and what he's created. I don't think he has any real prospects for what he could do next. I don't think he's a business savvy person. I don't think he's a very smart guy. He's an addict. He's emotionally fractured. I just don't. I think the implication was that might have been the end of the road for Kendall Roy. Now, you can look at it from the other side, too, which is like the world is still his oyster. He's worth like, upwards of $2 billion. That he could piece it back together, go do something else, start up the 100, build some bullshit. But as Jesse Armstrong put it after the episode, his whole thing was that he needed to be his dad. He needed to be as influential or as successful as his dad, even if that meant picking up the keys that his dad dropped, right? Mm-hmm. He's never going to do that. Is there a living person who believes that Kendall Roy could build his own pile? No. So I think that, for me, like everyone gets their own, read on this because it's art. For me, that was the end of the Kendall Roy story, in one way or another. I thought that the way Colin is standing like 20 yards off, sort of like, I'm going to let whatever happens here happen, was part of that read to me, where I was like, oh, I think this is a suicide moment.
Yeah, I mean, as soon as Kendall starts walking out of the Waystar Royco building, anybody watching that's ever watched any other TV show, I think, is kind of queued up for that, right? Like it feels dark in that way.
Got nothing left.
But that, then he obviously he makes it a little bit further. He's out of the building. He's got a coat on now, like where he's got Colin following him here. And so I think it's supposed to be pretty open for interpretation. I thought that the kind of maybe the most daunting piece of what we see here is that Kendall has always had, they've always tied Kendall to water in a lot of different ways. Whether it's the towards the end of season 3 when he's floating in the pool, or after he crushes the Living Plus speech and is kind of out waiting and floating in the ocean. There are even moments like when he's like getting out of rehab, I think, and he's like in the tub,
hot tub,
and there's all sorts of these, like Kendall at his lowest points, and sometimes even at his highest, I guess, has this connection with water.
He even tells Rome earlier in the season, "I'm water, man. I just flow."
That's right. Yeah. And so, okay, that's a great line to bring back up, because it's this very poignant scene where he finally just sits down on the bench and he looks out and the water is just flowing. Like, this is it's fast moving water.
It is moving, yeah.
You know what I mean? And so, like, I don't think for me, my interpretation is not that he threw himself off of the bridge right then and there, but just that I think that having the water in front of him, having him sit there and look out at it, was just kind of like, it certainly is a potential possibility for him.
Yeah, I think so too.
Because this is a broken guy with literally, like, in his own mind, nothing to live for at the moment.
And they couldn't have worked harder to tee us up for his demise. Like, how many times did he, what is it, episode 2 or 1 of this season, where he's like, look, I've smoked horse. I need something like all-consuming, or I'm going to fall off track, essentially.
Yeah.
He tells his sister, I think if you don't give me this, I'm going to die.
Yeah.
Like, and obviously it is possible that he pulls himself together in time and does something else with his life. But to me, the character ended right there because it was such a complete telling of his story.
Yeah.
Right? And I think in a lot of ways, he was still the main character. He was still the star of the show to me. Kendall Roy and Jeremy Strong playing him. But it just didn't end the way you might think a story would go about a person, right? Like that was the subversive, tragic nature of it. Jesse Armstrong got into the fact that, and after the episode, that this was always in his mind a tragedy.
Yeah.
A Greek-style tragedy, right? Which is why he delivers you these moments of happiness in the middle of this episode, because they torture you with the happy moments so that they can then, that the sad moments will be even more impactful. And these three could not, the story with Succession was always, can these three get on the same page? They never could. Yeah. They never did it. Not one time.
Yeah. And I think that heading into the back half of this season and towards the last few episodes, like, my initial prediction had been that all three siblings end up on the outside.
Right.
And when we started talking about the possibility of Kendall kind of like finding the Logan form, eviscerating all, and like seizing the power, it was a sexy, compelling idea. But the reason that why I think I hadn't gone there in the first place is because it's never who Kendall was. He didn't actually have the Loganness in him.
Right.
He made some feigns towards it a couple of times. There were a few moments where he shows some Logan, and of course he's got a little bit of that in him, but not all the way. He's not a Logan style character. He does not actually have that beast, that brute,
the force, yeah,
the force, the vim as he calls it, in him. He's got a little bit of something. He's got a little bit of the darkness and the bad things and the neglect and the bad dad and a bunch of these things where he can kind of like, fake it a little bit, but he was never that guy. And so I think about the line that what's his face delivers at the tailgate, Nate, right?
Oh,
where it
yeah.
says,
I'm not Gil and you're
I'm
not
not
Logan.
Gil and you're not Logan.
And that's a good thing.
And that's a good thing. And it is a good thing for everybody except for Kendall, I think.
Because he can't accept it, right?
Right.
Like, yeah.
But he's not Logan, and he never was, and he never will be. And so that's why this ending does make. I think this was the right ending, because through 4 seasons, what we've always seen is that like he never really had it all the way like that.
What a lot of people will tell you that have life experience is that the more you can come to terms with who you are and what you are, the further you'll go. Kendall had a complete inability to do that, right? In the same way that he was never able to accept that he wasn't his father. He's not that guy. He never has been that guy. His dad told him directly, "You're not a killer. You have to be a killer." Yeah, I mean, I think it's notable that, like the hat I am wearing, the Kendall Logan Roy crossed out or underlined hat, it's still, there's so much symbolism behind what happened there with that document. Obviously, my theory about the little princess didn't pan out, but the important piece of it being that,
although that the little princess does kind of fuck it
a little bit, yeah.
So,
but Kendall or Logan not naming a successor, not ever being able to really be forthright about what it was he desired to happen after he was gone. Not like where the show started, him not being able to step down. He had planned on it, and then he sees Kendall in action and says, "You know what? Never mind. I think I've got a few more years in me," and doing it until he's literally dead. The show was mostly still framed around the consequences of the man Logan Roy was, what he did as a man, what he created, what he built, that whole brute force shit from the funeral. And then also the neglect of his children, the failings as a father, the trauma he left behind, and what it did to everybody that had to deal with it, right? Like it was an incredibly well-told story. To kind of get into what I think about the show on the whole briefly here.
Yeah.
We'll talk about it in much more detail on Patreon later this week. But this is great TV. This was inarguably, Barrett, when we started the season, you said you thought Succession was in your top 3 for sure.
Yeah.
And I kind of
scoffed
at that. I was just like, I don't know if you can... That feels like a bold statement. And then once we got to like episode 5, I was like, never mind, Barrett. You were right. Now it's no question to me. This is top 5. If I don't know how you could argue otherwise, that it is one of the best things ever made on TV, bar none. Writing, storytelling, acting, directing. Somebody needs to give Mark Mylod some Emmys as well.
Yep.
That partnership of Jesse and Mark Mylod, I think they must have done the majority
I think they did the majority of this final season.
That was something else, man.
Yeah,
This was fucking unbelievably good.
Yeah. 100% agree. This is for sure top 3 for me. I'm not gonna place it in that top 3 at the moment because we're still dealing with a massive amount of recency bias, and I enjoyed this final season so much. But while watching the finale last night, one of the things that I had done like a season 1 and a back half of season 3 rewatch already, like just a couple of months ago, right? And watching the finale, I was thinking about how I cannot wait to rewatch this entire series.
Yeah, and how much different it's going to hit, right?
Yeah,
knowing where it goes.
And so like I think that for me now, my top 3 is a mix of Succession, Game of Thrones, and The Sopranos, with probably Game of Thrones. No, I'm not even going to say it. I'm not going to rank them at this moment.
It's impossible to do that. Yeah,
because I still maintain this is Oysters, Clams, and Cockles. We have to talk a little bit about Game of Thrones. The first 4 seasons of Game of Thrones are the best TV of all time for me. That it's unmatched. But I loved Succession, and I think as a complete television series, this is maybe the best that I've ever seen.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's fair to say that you don't want to get too crazy with it ranking-wise and dealing with the recency bias.
Yeah, we got to sit on it for a little bit.
And I mean,
But it was an amazing final season and a great finale.
that was where I was at the beginning of the season. Like, hold on, let's see if they can even close this out. Like, they've kind of done the same thing every year. Like, what's it going to be? How is it going to, like, what's the message going to be?
Yeah.
I think it said enough from a depth perspective about humanity, about family, about parenting, about the struggles of life and trauma and the vicious cycles that do get created. I thought, like, just on a deeper level, it was great. On the surface level, it was so much fun and so funny and so well done in every single aspect. I don't think, like, I'm just sitting here, I'm like, what can I come up with that's a negative? And there isn't one. Like, my negative was the same thing happens every season. But they even turned that into a deeper meaning, cooler story by the end of it all. And where somebody finally has to pull the plug on this whole thing. And Shiv kind of does. She's the one to do it.
Yep.
But it just excellent work to close it out and to stop before things could get any further. And you could tell if you've read any of the interviews from actors, Brian Cox included, he said last week, like, they did the twist too early. Like, he clearly wanted it to keep going. There were multiple characters that you've seen, I've seen interviews with, where you could get a feel for, like, the actors, they weren't ready to say goodbye yet. And I think that's what makes it so great.
Yep.
You leave the people wanting more, and you have done your job. That was it. They did that. They accomplished that. It's tough to do. In entertainment, in sports, in anything that involves tens and hundreds of millions of dollars, it is tough to close the book while it's still good. And they did that. They didn't fumble the bag. We didn't have a brand the broken situation, although you could kind of argue that we did, just because it was so shocking to see who ends up on top. You're like, didn't fucking see that coming unless you're that one TikToker who knows about baseball players and World Series triple plays.
Or us on Patreon last week.
Sure. Or us on Patreon last week. If you were really sussing it out like we were, right? Like, where every week this was one of our focuses to discuss deeply the plot and the intricacies of the storytelling and how it could all unfold. But this was brilliant. I was so happy that they didn't fumble the bag when it came down to it, because it appears this will be the end of what was one of the great runs in television history, as I said in the little pre-intro thing, that we went from August 21st of 2022, House of the Dragon started up.
Yep.
House of the Dragon Season 1, straight into The White Lotus Season 2, straight into The Last of Us, straight into Succession Season 4. That is an almost full calendar year of nonstop dominance, like a 9-month run where every single Sunday I knew the best show on TV that week was going to be on one channel. Well, it sounds like that might be done.
I'm hearing that The Idol is just a smash hit success that everybody loves and loves and loves.
98% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah.
Wild stuff. Wild stuff. But yeah, I think we're going to have to pass.
Yeah.
For the record, Barrett and I will both still be watching it.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah, it's got enough toxic masculinity in the pitch that we're in.
Yeah, but as multiple people have now told me, this is a smart decision to not try to cover this TV show as two straight white men on a podcast.
Yeah. Probably not our place. So we shan't. We shall not.
But I'm excited to see everybody back here for Silo.
I know. I'm pumped on it, man.
Be pumped. And
you haven't watched any of it yet, right?
None. But I'm going to start soon. Also, just I'll say once again, obviously we've given you a ton of content here, but if we miss anything you want to hear more about, let's have us go deeper onto. Great week to join the Patreon if you're not already there. Blow up that hotline, give us some good calls, because we got one more sesh to do to run it back for this final season of Succession here. So
yes, sir.
Anything you want us to talk about, now's your chance.
Yeah, we'll be doing an hour on Thursday on patreon.com/oysters, clams, cockles. That's the only place you can find it to enjoy our last episode probably ever discussing Succession in length. That was a sad thing to kind of digest, like that yesterday was the last day of my life that a new episode of Succession will air, in all likelihood. I would say 99.9% chance. Even if they did leave it open-ended where they could do several different things with it. I think that was it. Barrett and I will be back to close this chapter of Oysters, Clams, and Cockles on Thursday on Patreon. We did an exclusive ad-free episode every week driven by hotline calls from the Oyster Clam Co. board members, as we call them. Subscribe on patreon.com/oysters, clams, cockles today for as little as $5 a month to support the show and enjoy so much more exclusive OCC content ad-free. Remember, there are already 9 bonus episodes for Succession's final season on Patreon. You could listen to all of them right now when you sign up if you wanted to. And think of it as a way to say thank you to us for our service all season long if you want to as well. This is our full-time gig, my full-time gig, Barrett's part-time side gig, working on Oysters, Clams, and Cockles. And we appreciate everybody who's been there with us on Patreon. Again, if you're like, well, I'm good on Succession, there's plenty of other stuff on our Patreon as well, including all of our Last of Us Hotline Call bonus episodes, bonus coverage for Season 1 of House of the Dragon, Season 2 of The White Lotus, and if you're like, this is finally time for me to watch The Sopranos, we have an entire companion podcast for HBO's classic crime drama, The Sopranos, friendly to first-timers and rewatchers. Every single episode of The Sopranos, Barrett and I covered it between, I guess it was like during the pandemic, right? That's when we
pretty much. Yeah.
We went deep on The Sopranos. Yeah. Patreon.com/oysters, clams, cockles. Get in there, support OCC, get even more. And support our sponsors as well. We appreciate it. For those of you who have supported our sponsors this season by using URLs and codes that we provide, that is also how we pay the piper here at Oyster Clam Co. Today we had Bird Dogs. Go to birddogs.com, use code DRAGON. Get a free Yeti-style tumbler with your order of the most comfortable and versatile shorts, pants, and bathing suits known to man. That's birddogs.com, code DRAGON, when you check out to get that free tumbler with your order. Link and code are in the description of this episode as well. If you're an F1 fan, check out Bolin Media's premier F1 programming, Formula Bone, at youtube.com/@Formula Bone. Exciting race in Monaco this past weekend. Formula Bone will have a recap for you. They do a preview and recap of every single race in the F1 season. youtube.com/@Formula Bone and @Formula Bone on social media. Finally, for more from me, Ross Bolin, listen to the Ross Bolin podcast wherever podcasts are played, or watch on youtube.com/@the Ross Bolin podcast if it's available. I think we recently caught a YouTube suspension.
Uh-oh.
Not great. If we're talking about Barry Wood, the meme.
Don't know who that is.
Mr. Big Cock.
Yes.
Follow me on Twitter and Instagram @WRBolin. Mr. Dudley, where can the people follow you and keep up with you?
Check me out at Barrett Dudley across the social media.
Go to bolinmedia.com/shop to grab yourself some merch. Barrett and I will be back on Thursday to further digest and discuss the final episode of Succession and the series as a whole on Patreon, driven by hotline calls from our listeners. Thank you for riding with us all season long. Thank you especially to those of you who have been listening every week since August of last year when HBO's spectacular run began with House of the Dragon Season 1. Thank you for sharing our show with those you know. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And until we meet again in a couple of weeks to watch Silo on Apple TV Plus together one last time, fuck off.